Ladies and gentlemen, in the continuation of the Infrastructure Summit, we shall be hearing a panel discussion now about the perspectives of data protection, the source of trust in the financial system. The moderator of this section is here with us in the studio. He is Peter Durojaiye, who is a director at PwC. After spending 20 years in the United States, Peter relocated back to Europe to lead the EMEA hub of PwC's Global Cyber Impact Center. Today, he is based in Budapest, Hungary. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introductions, and thank you, Raj, for the engaging presentation and for really sharing your insights on the impact of COVID-19 and the evolving threat landscape. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to also welcome you to this year's World FinTech Festival. Our virtual panel is going to focus on data protection and really the source of trust in the financial system. Now, cybersecurity has become a subset or a foundation for a modern business. And at PwC, we have recently published our annual Global Digital Trust Insights survey. More than 3,000 business and technology leaders shared their views. And what we found is that financial institutions are really increasingly focusing on securing better customer experiences through advanced cyber defense and resilience capabilities. So we're looking to take a deeper dive into these topics. Let me introduce our four panelists. Mr. Ben Lindgreen is the head of cyber resilience at PayUK. PayUK develops and maintains the payment systems and standards which really create the lifeblood for the UK economy. And Ben's technical and managerial information security experience has been gained through both consultancy and in-house roles. And Ben, if I remember right, this month marks the 20th year of you being in this field, security?
Yes, I'm starting to show my age now, and nearly 10 years with Pay.UK.
Great milestone, and good to have you here. Welcome, Ben. Mr. Carsten Fischer. Carsten is the Chief Security Officer at Deutsche Bank. And in that capacity, in that function, Carsten is both responsible for both physical security and cybersecurity. And Carsten was part of the team that originally designed the strategy for the first, second, and third line of defense at the organization and has since taken on various leadership roles. And that includes running operations for security for several years. And operations is one of Carsten's passions as well. It's really great to have you with us, Carsten. Welcome.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, good to have you.
Mr. Istvan Lam. Istvan is the CEO and founder of Tresorit. And Istvan's academic work led to the successful establishment of the startup company, which he has been leading for coming up 10 years now, I believe. Now, obviously, since then, Tresorit has become an award-winning cloud security service which provides end-to-end data protection. So Istvan represents a very unique perspective. So I'm really excited that you're able to join us here. Welcome, Istvan.
Thank you, Peter.
And last but not least, Mr. Steve Brown. Steve is the Director of Cybersecurity at Mastercard, and he's the European lead responsible for the implementation and integration of Mastercard's cybersecurity framework, and that includes data breach detection and also the cyber risk assessment technologies related to all stakeholders. And it's really interesting because he has taken on this tough assignment in a new company at a very difficult time at the beginning of this year. So we look to hear from him. Good to have you here. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for the invite.
Now let's get started. I'd like for us to start with something perhaps a bit unorthodox here. It's been a challenging year. And Raj depicted a pretty realistic picture of the evolving threat landscape. And honestly, cybersecurity, the topic of cybersecurity strikes fear into most people. Incidents and criminal activities have been on the rise. Many of us have had personal losses. And this harsh reality has only been exacerbated by the rise of COVID. We all know this. But there's been many fun memories and also positives to take away. So where I'd like for us to start is let's go around, Ben, Carsten, Istvan, and Steve, and share something positive or even fun from your past, if you will. Ben, let's start with you.
Oh, thank you for letting me go first there. Something fun. I think really with everything that's been going on in the last year, it's the opportunity to take joy and to think about the small things. It's we have to look after ourselves, and it's about enjoying the opportunity of working from home has given me more time to spend with my children. So I'm going to take that as a positive for the year.
Great, and I agree with you. Thank you. Carsten?
Yeah, I think the way how we're working has fundamentally changed, and I do think that's positive. I have not really been somebody who's working from home. I think if I went on vacation that day, I sort of worked from home a couple of hours before I left. So that's not really working from home. So I found that a very good experience. The most funny thing I probably had was being in a video conference call, and then my son came in, who's 9 years old, hugging dad before he goes to bed. So I now understood that hugging your kids is socially accepted in the meanwhile in global conference calls, what I think is great.
It absolutely is. And it reminds me when my two younger sons came in when I had a conference call dressed in as Spider-Man and Hulk, and my coworkers keep asking for them. So absolutely the standards have changed. Istvan, anything on your end you care to share?
Yeah, I joined the fatherhood early this year. Actually, it was RSA conference, and I couldn't go to the RSA conference because my little daughter was born earlier than expected. So that was that was my lost or not happened trip. Since then, I didn't travel. And I was basically home and enjoying fatherhood and being in the next door as a help for my wife, which is good, and I really enjoy that. And one story which came into my mind was actually I was in the middle of a discussion, and my wife said, "Oh, you really need to take care of your little daughter. You really need to do something." And I said, I cannot get out, and because I'm having a sort of conversation with someone. But I said, you really need to do this. And then, okay, I let her sitting in my lap, and the other person accepted that. I started playing with little toys on the other end to entertaining my little daughter. So that my daughter was sitting in my lap and enjoying the conversation. I mean, we had a serious conversation about something, and then you can see that little toys are coming into the picture from side to side, and you try not to smile during that.
Makes you wonder what daddy does for work, right? But this is actually, I can relate to this. When my third son was born, I took 2 weeks off only. I was living in California, traveling across the West Coast, and just didn't really have time. And a friend of mine, coworker, has the opportunity to take 2 months off. And what I told him is do it. Now is better than ever. So I agree with that. Steve, anything you could share?
Yeah, very similar actually. It seems we have a lot in common on this panel. But I became a father in July, so the midst of a pandemic, and having a baby has presented its own challenges, but also presented its own opportunities. So the chance of spending more time with my family here. I'd only joined Mastercard in March with visions of, as their kind of European lead, traveling and meeting people and all this. And the furthest I've been is to my attic, where I currently reside. So, but that aside, it has presented challenges to us all in the cybersecurity profession, but it's also presented a great deal of opportunities as well. The emergence of new technologies, everybody becoming particularly au fait with Zoom or Teams or whichever platform it is, waking the rest of our organizations maybe from a technical or technology slumber and forcing that into people's lives, which for the majority of time has been a good thing.
Thank you. And Steve, let's stay with you for a minute. You're a very purpose-driven professional. I like to think of you as the collaborator in the community. And if we are to build trust in the financial system, how do you view your role and purpose in this journey?
Well, certainly, cybersecurity has been a huge part of my life for 17 years. Prior to joining Mastercard, I was an investigator for the UK's National Crime Agency. I worked within the National Cybercrime Unit, both on investigations and intelligence. So collaboration has really been a key part of my life and everything that my teams have been involved in throughout that process. And the evolution really, as we've seen, cybercrime, cyber criminals, nation states, as Raj touched upon before, as they've evolved, we've had to as well. We've had to develop our own techniques. We've had to develop our own relationships in very much the same way that cyber criminals have. And I see our role, even now mine at Mastercard and at my fellow panel members here, and the same as I did in law enforcement, is that we're here to protect. We're here to protect our companies. We're here to protect our customers, and prevent cyber attacks. We need to try and protect them in the very first place, but prevention is better than cure. So what technologies, what investments can we make in our companies, in our people, and certainly work with our customers to be able to prevent cyber attacks from happening? So if you think way back, well, not that far back actually, but financial services and the financial sector used to be about protecting customers' money. That was all you were charged with, really, and providing them access to it when they wanted, whether that was them building physical walls higher, ensuring that there were entry and exit systems that were secure within banks on the high street. But now it goes a lot more beyond that, and even beyond just purely the transaction space as well. This is about how we protect more than their money. It's about how we protect their data. That's as valuable, if not more valuable, to our customers than their money is, because without your identity, you can't be anybody, and other people can then take advantage of that through identity theft, using it for money laundering or terrorist financing and many others. So we now need to include data. We now need to provide a secure environment for our customers to operate in, so that they feel safe, so that they feel they can put their trust in us, and they can put their trust in the technologies that we try and implement. And how we do that, through the defining and improving of our standards as a community. This can't be done in isolation. This needs to be a community-driven project, to be able to improve those standards, to try and ensure some form of parity and try and get ahead of cyber criminals. So I see that very much as my role. I always have, and hopefully always will.
Great, thank you for sharing. And Ben, think of you as the ambassador. Would you mind sharing your role and purpose and what drives you?
So within Pay.UK, we run the UK's retail payment systems. So that's backs faster payments. So online banking, we're the conduit that enables banks to make payments between themselves. And so we're very much, as Steve was saying, it's all about the ecosystem. It's about working together and ensuring that as a whole, we provide that security and stability that allows end customers to have confidence that the payments they make will get to where they need to go and will be made correctly. So as part of our role, it's about making sure that everyone in the ecosystem is working together, that we have robust controls, that we have robust standards. And I think the changing element with the financial sector at the moment is that it's getting much bigger. It's not just your traditional banks now. There's a growth in new technology companies that are coming in. There are more ways to make payments. There are different ways. And it's about making sure that any of the existing systems are flexible enough and secure enough to enable those things to take place and allow innovation to happen in the systems, and enable new ways to come along that make it easier and safer for people to make payments.
Thank you. And cybersecurity is such a demanding and dynamic field. I think we have to be purpose-led to stay in it for decades and be successful. Now, as the pandemic continues, digital transformation has really helped firms adapt earlier. And whatever comes next, digital transformation will continue to play a really strong key role in it, likely adding more personalized anytime, anywhere services for our customers. Istvan, in your opinion, who has been leading the digital transformation? Is it the CEO? Is it the Chief Technology Officer? Maybe COVID? Bad guys? Someone else? Something else?
So digital transformation is I think is pushed by the customers, by the market. So that's the demands for more demand to deliver a better service to the customers, a cheaper way to deliver those services. So it's what we see. It really depends on the company itself. Some companies are are really realizing and coming from the CIO parts as well. Sometimes it's coming from more the business part, but certainly the COVID did the last push. So that COVID, whoever was the driver earlier, COVID helped that driver and gave that last push. And the interesting question, so that this accelerated speed of adaptation of the certain digital transformation will be that, okay, how we'll be able to do that, meeting the standards and meeting the security requirements certain organizations set up earlier. So they're not jumping on something they're not completely comfortable with, especially banks. There, for instance, cloud technology was, a lot of banks are saying, no, we will not go to the cloud. We're not using cloud technology, especially certain areas like core banking things. There is a big pushback, but recently this pushback started to ease up. That this is what we see, that it's these companies became more open because there's a push that COVID gave that, and that acceleration. What I try to say here, that while this rush is happening, we should not forget that there is a reason why there are certain rules and regulations inside an organization or inside an industry. So that, for instance, in banking, and whenever technology is being chosen with digital transformation, cybersecurity should be paramount. It should not be an afterthought in this consideration.
Thank you, Istvan. Those are really interesting points. And speaking of complex organizations, I'm sure, Carsten, you have an angle on digital transformation and who's been driving this. So we'd be very interested in hearing your thoughts as well.
I have no clue why you think about Deutsche Bank being a complex organization, but we'll leave that for a different one. Yeah, building on what Istvan said, I think our personal life has changed with digitalization and COVID as well. So COVID pushed that digitalization. I mean, the fact that we're now all on video here rather than in a room somewhere in Budapest tells you a story. And I think that's for banking as well. The digitalization will help. I know people think about digital and cloud as being an evil. I do think as cloud and digitalization as some sort of being an opportunity for us. I mean, think about one thing. If in the past 20 years, or like last 25 years, we have worried about how we can make sure that we get our on-prem environment as secure as possible. We've invested billions to make it secure. And we've always thought about, wouldn't it be great if somebody comes along and offer that out of the box as a secure opportunity and as a secure service? And here we are, and look at cloud. I mean, if you look at the investments that the cloud providers do as part of their business model, that is by far more than we have spent in the past individually. So that gives a great opportunity from a financial perspective. I do think the challenge we will have over time, though, is then to explain that properly. Explain that to our clients, why we think that's a secure environment, and especially explain that properly together with the cloud providers to the regulators. I don't think that regulators in itself would push back and saying, no, cloud mustn't happen. But obviously, they have a big interest to better understand why is that as secure as your on-prem environment, or why is that maybe even more secure than our on-prem environment. So I think our job is now to use that, to sort of use that opportunity that we've been given, not only by COVID, but with COVID as well, in pushing digitalization, pushing cloud, and making sure that we get our clients and our regulators onto that journey. And it's not like we're the first one doing that. I mean, a lot of financial institutions are on the cloud already, and a lot of other companies are as well. And we are all comfortable in sharing our data in the cloud. So I do think that's a big opportunity for the whole market.
Carsten, you just opened up Pandora's box here. I was looking at both Steve and Istvan nodding, Ben, not so much, because I think you just became 5 years older a minute ago. But Steve, I really wonder, anything you'd like to share? We talk about digital transformation now, cloud adoption, and we are seeing still some resistance, especially if you look at the budget and where spending goes. What are you seeing here? Anything you'd like to kind of reflect on?
I think we're just seeing opportunity, but we're seeing opportunity both from our company's perspective, for our customers' perspective. So ease of access, the innovation behind new payments. It's almost like contactless is now like the archaic solution. It's now, we're moving on even further into tokenization and the like. But it's also providing those opportunities again for criminals. They will always evolve to whatever opportunity there will be out there. So whether that's if we move to, as people move to cloud and there's an increase in speed, then we see an amplification of speed and scale of cyber attacks. So attack automation or speed of computation and their communication, because they are learning as quickly as we are. They almost, they're conducting their own debriefs when there is law enforcement interdiction or private industry action that brings down their infrastructure. They take it away, they debrief it, and they look at how they can come back harder. We see the fact that now, as Carsten mentioned, we're all working from home. That means a wider attack surface as well. So adoption of new technologies by industry and the scale up of IoT devices and systems is great, and it brings new technology into our lives. It makes our shopping. We're all coming up to Christmas now, so it makes shopping a lot easier. We don't have to go to the high street, but it also then brings those vulnerabilities. So it's incumbent on us, again, as cybersecurity professionals, to be able to articulate, to educate not only our own companies, our own customers, but friends and relatives and everybody. Our job never stops, really, does it? So whilst it brings a lot of opportunity for the good, it also brings some for the bad. So we need to be cognizant of that.
No, thank you. And this conversation wouldn't be complete without Ben, you weighing in, giving your perspective as well on what's been heard. So if you don't mind, just briefly, if you could provide your perspective, that would be great.
I think the things that Carsten was saying were absolutely right about cloud. It does provide great opportunities. I think my only note of caution would be that cloud isn't ubiquitous. There are different cloud providers. They've got different qualities. And I think as an organization, you need to make sure that you understand your own processes and understand what you want to achieve and take the right risk-based approach when getting those cloud services to make sure that you get what's needed, because there are very different capabilities out there. And I think the more that you understand what you want and the better that you can manage that, like you would manage any supply chain, then the better result you will get out of cloud. But certainly the scale of the large cloud providers, that the work that they can put into securing those systems is something that I think the vast majority of organizations should look into, because they can hopefully get good savings and get a more secure environment to work in.
Thank you. Now, taking your thoughts forward, so we've seen a seismic shift towards permanent remote work, and Carsten, you touched on that. Greater flexibility for all of us. I'm probably the only one wearing a jacket, shoes right now, but I'm not going to ask you to stand up. However, it also opened up more potential for new cyber threats. Now, chief security officers are expected to safeguard the company's sensitive data and critical assets. And executive leaders require chief security officers to both secure the day-to-day needs of critical complex infrastructure and also shepherd the actual needs of the digitalization plan. So it's both operational in a way and transformational, the leadership that's required. So as you figured, Carsten, my question is to you, how do you see the role of chief security officers in this accelerated digital transformation and day and age that we live in?
I don't think it would be fair to say more important, but I would probably start with saying more important. But for a reason, and I want to build on something that Ben said. You talked about risk-based, Ben. I would probably say I would like to talk about threat-based. And that will then probably also explain why the Chief Security Office is an important part of the overall organization. I do think we need to start looking at, we're talking about the opportunities, but obviously the downside of the opportunity is the threat. So if we look at the cyber threat and then we try to translate what that means to us, and I think that's the role of the chief security officer, translate to the organization, what's your threat? If you're not doing any payment, very unrealistic in a bank, but if you don't do any payment, then any payment threat is irrelevant to you. But if you are in the payment business, then that's probably the most important threat you need to look at. And then you need to be prepared for that. And then you need to align your whole organization, all your measures, all your controls, all your standards need then to be sort of mapped against that threat. And to be honest, being selfish here, but who's better suited to explain threat than the chief security officer? So that's why I do think we are in the middle of that. We're part of that journey. But again, that's to what I said earlier. It's our job to get people with us on that journey. And in that regard to threat, that means being properly able to explain why this is a big threat to the organization and why that would then translate to a big risk and potential losses, because obviously we are also asking for a lot of investments on the other hand, and that's something that we need to balance in the future much better than, I wouldn't say much better, but much more than we've done in the past, I think.
Thank you. Now, Ben, given that Carsten actually referred to you as well, in your perspective, how do you balance regulatory requirements with the need to reduce risk, which may not always be exactly the same, and the threat aspect that Carsten just mentioned, this complexity?
I think the important thing is to realize that they're all changing. And as security professionals, as security functions, we're here to support our relevant businesses. And Carsten's absolutely right with regards to the threat and the way that threat environment is changing. It's maturing in some ways, and in a similar manner as the way that the regulatory requirements are updating and they're evolving to change to reflect changing views in the marketplace. So as security professionals and organizations, we need to reflect that these systems are changing and we need to respond to it. We can't assume that everything remains static. So whether we're looking at it from a threat-based process or even from a more traditional risk-based process, things aren't static. Something that is a well-managed risk, well-known risk today, due to a change in the threat landscape, may actually become a risk that is out of appetite tomorrow. And I think the organizations that best understand that and can look at the future trends and look how things are going, they're in a better position to be able to both deal with those threats and also support the business and help the business perform in the way that it does. When considering risk, most businesses wouldn't want a zero appetite to risk. It would make it very difficult to do the business.
Right.
And at the end of the day, security is about supporting the business and supporting the risk appetite that your organization has.
No, thank you. And this is really interesting. We're talking about threats, and the keynote started with that as well. And Steve, given your background, it's not just threats, but threat intelligence and sharing it. So when it comes to sharing all this information in this ecosystem, any leading practices, anything we should look out for?
Yeah, I mean, well, collaboration is key, really. So the importance of building and maintaining relationships when everything's going well, I think, is key. So you've got those, ingrained, both from a personal level, a professional level, but right across your company and industry. And I've been fortunate enough, certainly in law enforcement, to be, members of certain groups and work with different agencies, but important as well to leverage academia and leverage the private industry as well. Now it's about how we can quickly share that intelligence and ensure its reliability. It's very much a case of, if I've got information, if I've got intelligence that I want to be able to share with the community, yeah, it's great to get it out quickly, but I want to ensure that that's accurate, because I don't want people acting upon something that, isn't provenanced, isn't corroborated, because, that diminishes my credibility personally and certainly that of my company. So again, important to have a dual source of your information, and certainly to talk things through. Ensure that you're humble and you possess enough humility to be able to talk through your bad practices as well. Things that you've learned the hard way if you've been victim of a cyber attack or a data breach. I think that would give you more credibility. And I look back on some of my times when I worked in the US, when I sat across from CISOs of Target or OPM or some of the other major victims of cyber attacks there. And that's where I learned the most, from those people who were humble enough to be able to share what they did wrong. Everyone can talk about what they do right or what they perceive that they're doing right, but how can we learn those practices within the community? And that's really about trust, and it's about creating those relationships on a sunny day. You don't want to be trying to run around when it's raining and the world's kind of caving in. So that would be my top tip, is to have those relationships, create them on a sunny day rather than a rainy one.
And do you see that the type of information that's being shared, not just iOS's indicators of compromise, but even how criminals are moving laterally, some of this lesson learned, are they shared appropriately and sufficiently, or you think there may be an opportunity there?
There's always room for improvement as far as TTPs and the like. There are plenty of vendors, plenty of threat intelligence companies out there that can share 1 million TTPs, and you can get that kind of information. But knowing about what motivates criminals, knowing about the particular vulnerability that you may have been susceptible to, and again, being humble enough to share that with your peers, is what will provide you with that kind of credibility. Hopefully provide you with that credibility within the community, because no one wants to learn the hard way from mistakes that other people have made. So the more that they can take on board from yourself, then hopefully then when it's their turn to maybe share something with you, then they will do.
Agree. Now, this is 2020, and resilience is perhaps an overused term, but very important. So resilience in cybersecurity comes down to the ability to anticipate, withstand, and recover from adverse events. As the head of resilience, Ben, what does it really come down to? What's critically important around building strong resilience capabilities?
I think I'm going to sound like a stuck record, but again, it's understanding your business. If you don't understand your business and don't understand what is critical to your business, then it's very, very difficult to be resilient. So that also looks at concepts such as impact tolerances. How long can certain processes or capabilities of your business be out before it causes you major issues? You need to understand those, you need to plan for it. And then as you mentioned, resilience is about being able to recover from a breach or from an issue. But I think the important thing is testing that. And it goes back to a similar point as to Steve made about making good connections on sunny days. You want to test these things before you actually have a real incident. And you want to make your tests as realistic as possible. I think traditionally, certainly in some of my previous organizations, when you do a disaster recovery test, you would make sure that everything that could be there in place before the test was there. So nobody would have holidays. You would make sure that everybody was in. Unfortunately, the real world isn't like that. When you have a major issue or an incident, it's likely at 5 o'clock in the evening on a Friday. Before a holiday weekend, you'll have key people out. How do you react and respond with those key people out? You can't just expect that all of your go-to people will be in the office. What will do you have alternates for key roles? Do they understand their roles? And the more that you can test in those types of circumstances, then the better that you'll be able to perform when a real incident does actually happen.
Thank you. And Istvan, I'd be really interested to hear your views around this, which may be more specific to cloud and encryption, but when it comes to resilience and having similar conversations with companies.
In resilience, I think what Stephen and Ben said that the best time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining. But I think now we can easily say that the sun is not necessarily shining, but we still need to fix a few things, so that we need to move on and fix those problems. But it's also that we need to rely on an earlier infrastructure. What I want to point out regarding to I think the technologies and the cloud, more specific problems. I think in cybersecurity there is a problem of having reactive technologies and also that building something for proactive protection. I'll just give you an example. If you are realizing that someone is wiretapping your phone line with the old PST and phone lines, then you can do reactive actions. But then came encryption, and that's basically a proactive way that preventing wiretapping. And what I try to say that in a lot of cases, proactive sort of investment in cybersecurity is not done. The technologies are more reactive, that they try to fix the problem when it occurs, and not try to build an infrastructure which is necessarily proactively preventing things. And what I just give you an example. I mean, what I see in the cloud, what we are doing is cloud encryption, and it's cloud encryption is a proactive technology, so that they try to prevent problems through not exposing the data to a third party, and the third party to access that data. And what we see that these technologies basically can convince even conservative buyers, and sometimes the proactive creating a proactive technology or proactive protection helps to build trust, which is essential to rely on a certain technology. What I try to say that when it comes to cloud, as me being a cloud vendor or running a cloud vendor company, for me, in order to succeed in convincing more and more companies to go to the cloud, I need to be able to convince the CISOs, the security professionals, and everyone else that this can be trusted. And what I see that basically the cloud need to earn the trust, and there are ways to earn that. There are technologies to do that. Obviously, that these technologies need to be used in combination of with knowing the risk and knowing the processes. What Ben pointed out, that it cannot live without that, and that's where we're connected, where the vendor and someone who's running the organization, you guys. We are connected, because you know that how your organization function, what are the risks and what are the things. We vendors are coming with certain solutions, certain things, but this is the collaboration. I think Stephen pointed out that how we can work together.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I know that this could make for a longer conversation as well, and Carsten referred to this a little bit, but just in the interest of time, as we wrap up the conversation, what would be interesting, but really, let's make it short. If you kind of go around, I think our audience is always interested in seeing around the corner what's coming in 2021, what may be some of the trends, but we have to keep it somewhat short. So maybe Carsten, starting with you, any nuggets of wisdom that you'd like to share around this?
I do think that's probably not that rocket science, and we talked about that earlier today, and Raj did that especially. I think we will definitely see that especially ransomware attacks will become even more sophisticated. They will, as Steve said that earlier, they will be quicker than we are in developing new methods in using all of that. So that's why probably I would build on what Steve said earlier. Let's make sure that we use those sunny days, if we have them, to build relationships and share, because I do think that this is the only way how we can protect ourselves for those, to maybe be able to avoid those super rainy days.
Great, sounds good. Steve, anything to add to it?
Yeah, well, just further to that, I think certainly the leverage by ourselves, but also then by criminals of AI, as they look to kind of automate reconnaissance, look at quicker and more secretive ways of intruding our networks, the ability to move laterally across them. all then feeds into a huge point that we keep touching upon here, and that is about our resilience. You know, it's about practice. It's about building your your company's response into the muscle memory. So it's no use just having a playbook. It's about going through that over and over, plan and practice, know your business continuity plans, know your protocols, know your procedures, know who to call. It is one of the big key things that certainly I learned in law enforcement. One of the big messages I always wanted to convey then to speaking with CISOs, speaking with cybersecurity professionals as I move forward, was plan these things, practice them over and over again. That would be my kind of top tip.
Thank you, Steve. And I'm conscious that we're running out of time, and I think you basically summarized most of the key points that we covered today. So I wanted to thank first Raj and all of our panelists for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today, share your insights. I think we could talk for hours on this topic, but I'm really hoping that in the new year we get to actually do that in person. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Peter, and thank you to all the gentlemen in the panel. I think we truly could have listened to this for a much longer period of time. Truly very informative perspectives and an insightful discussion.